just steps up your elegant grace. Beauty with brains puts the world in its place. They light the mic, that truth ignites, burning through the fake in the dead of night. Feminism shaking, red pill faking, they're breaking every chain the culture's making. No simps, no saints, no soft disguise. They see through the games and the alibis. They're not here to please, they're here to lead. Truth and balance, that's the creed. No one's a boom. Energy of truth on fire. They're calling out the world's desire. From fake ideals to more decay. They're lighting up the modern age. No one's safe, not the church, not fame. They're flipping the script, rewriting the game. Love and logic, heart and soul, saving the truth for this nation's soul.
Whoa. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Glenn Lawrence, and I'm here with the one and only Miss Gia MaCool. And tonight, we're stepping straight into the fire. We're going to be talking about a topic that, well, makes every Christian lose their minds faster than anything else in the marriage space. What am I talking about? Polygyny. Yeah. One man, more than one wife. Yep. You can already feel half of the internet clutching their pearls already. You know, you ever notice how the modern church is selective outrage? It's like a condition that they have. Christians today don't see them to have really a problem with divorce anymore. It's okay. Serial monogamy is fine, apparently. Well, sister, God wants you to be happy. That's what they say. You know, porn addiction, brother, it's a struggle. You know, we all fall short. Kids growing up in broken homes, stepdads rotating in and out like they were a temp job, and we just slap a worship song over it and call it, well, it's complicated. All of that fits nice and tidy into the feminist playbook the church has already quietly agreed to run. I know, it's kind of weird. Sad, isn't it? But the second you mention something truly patriarchal, the second you talk about a man actually ruling his household, the second you say, hey, biblically, one man having more than one wife isn't automatically a sin. And suddenly, in the comment section, they lose their salvation. Now it is heresy, wolf, cult leader. This is dangerous. Really? Well, divorce on repeat is fine. Kids without fathers, manageable. OnlyFans, thirst traps, and Christian women farming attention online. We're all on our journey. But one man with two wives under a covenant, that's where everybody suddenly rediscovers holiness. You know, you miss me with all that selective morality. What we're seeing isn't outrage over sin. Really, it's outrage over patriarchy. The modern church isn't disgusted by broken homes. It's disgusted by masculine structure, not by chaos, but by order, not by weakness, but by male authority. And that's right there, is the crack in the facade we're going to be putting pressure on tonight.
Glenn's not exaggerating. I mean, look what happened with Pastor Rich Tidewell. A man publicly owns the fact that he's polygamous, has two wives. He announces baby number 8 on the way, and social media is in a full-blown nervous breakdown. So you'd think that he'd walk into the pupil and he had a pentagram tattooed on his forehead, the way they were acting, because it was like, this is abusive, this is not God's design, you know, this is a cult, this is grooming. Like, I heard all sorts of things, but basically these are the same Christians sitting quietly in the churches where half the room has been divorced once or twice. The husbands and the wives are basically roommates, right? There's like sexless marriages. Porn has more influence in their bedroom than the Bible does. And kids are being raised in a chaos, calling it normal. But this one man taking the responsibility of two wives and having multiple children under a covenant, that's where they're drawing the line. I mean, let's be honest. The church is not offended by dysfunction anymore. It's comfortable with it. And what offends them is the masculine frame they can't control. That's really what it comes down to. A man with enough presence, resources, and leadership that more than one woman willingly binds herself to him in a covenant, I mean, that terrifies and obviously is scaring people, because a man like that doesn't build his theology around women's feelings. He's not moving like a man on eggshells. He doesn't bow to an emotional blackmail. He doesn't treat feminism like it's the third person of the Trinity. The freak out over polygamy is it's about numbers of wives. It's about getting the set terms of marriage, God's order, or cultural comfort. And that's why this conversation is so hard, it's so ugly, and it's so unavoidable right now.
So that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this episode. We're not here to play it safe. We're here to ask questions everybody's dodging. Is polygyny really the great evil? Or does it expose how compromised, feminized, and soft modern Christianity has become? Because if you actually open the Bible instead of your TikTok devotional, you're going to find that Abraham, Jacob, and David had more wives, multiple wives. God didn't fry them on the spot. You're going to find laws that regulated multiple wives, not banning them. But talk about that today, and Christians act like you're sacrificing goats in your living room. So today, we brought on a man who lives right in the center of the firestorm. He's been called every name in the book: the polygyny guy, the heretic, dangerous, all of it. He's debated well-known voices like Andrew Wilson. He's had Christian influencers and theologians like Mike Winger make response videos to his position. And he's still standing on the same line. If the Bible doesn't call it a sin, why do you? So love him or hate him, he's not running from the smoke. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Rob Kowalski.
What's up, Glenn? How are you, Gia?
Nice to have you on.
It's great to join you guys.
Rob, let me just throw you this right out the gate, okay? We live in a church culture that tolerates divorce. They say they don't tolerate porn, but they do. They tolerate broken homes, but the second a man mentions or even says, yo, I have two wives under one covenant, and I'm taking responsibility for them, the outrage goes nuclear. I mean, we saw that with Pastor Rich Tidwell when he announced it recently about his polygynous relationships and, you know, the 8th baby on the way. And Christians act like he ripped Genesis out of the Bible. So
Right.
What do you think this polygyny, what do you think about this whole polygyny patriarchy, man ruling his house? Why is it so triggering for Christians and more than actually dysfunctional relationships that we see now? What is the real issue?
I mean, some people suspect or have proposed that it's a spiritual thing, that there's actually an evil spirit behind it, Ashtoreth. There's Jacob Folk wrote a great book about it called Exposing the Spirit of Ashtoreth. And if you look in the Old Testament, you know, every time the Israelites drifted away from God, they start worshiping these, you know, pagan gods, Baal and Ashtoreth. They started up these poles, Ashtoreth poles. And the way they rooted it out was polygyny. You know, Joash, you know, he said first thing he did is he gave him two wives, the priest, Jehoiada, I think it was. Because I think this is, you know, patriarchy is possible without polygyny, but polygyny, how did it go? I actually tweeted this. Patriarchy without polygyny is possible, but patriarchy with polygyny, I don't know if I said that right, but basically it's impossible not to have patriarchy if you have polygyny in the relationship, because it automatically sets things in order. It automatically, and women don't like to hear this, but it does subjugate them to the man on some level, because we're not equals. It would be like me going to God or to Jesus and saying, okay, I am the bride of Christ. I'm your bride, Jesus, but you can't love anyone but me. No, he can love whoever he wants, as many people, as many brides as he wants, he can have. And I'm just grateful that he took me. That's the way it's supposed to be in a marriage. It's a perfect picture of our relationship with Jesus. It's not a coincidence that he chose the metaphor of the bride of Christ. It's also not a coincidence that he compares his second coming to a man coming back for 10 virgin brides. That's a polygynous marriage. He's the groom. Would Jesus have ever compared used a sinful analogy of his second coming to be like, oh, my second coming is like a thief that comes to steal your stuff in the middle of the night? No, he said it was a polygynous marriage. Now people say, oh, they were bridesmaids. Bull crap. They were virgins. No point including that detail. And they banged on the door and said, Lord, Lord, when they couldn't get in the marriage chamber. If you look up the definition of that word, it says person to whom I belong. You don't call your friend's future husband Lord. No, they were brides. The only reason we try to dismiss it and say they're bridesmaids is because we're looking at this through a very Western lens. And when you go all the way back, monogamy only did not come from God. It did not come from God's people. It came from the Romans, one man, one woman, hence the term romantic, right? And they were pagans. They were also very immoral. The men back then had a desire for variety just like all men do, except they expressed it through prostitutes and mistresses, and they were sleeping with boys. It wasn't about morality. It was about inheritance rules. They just wanted to make the population easier to control. The Jews, the Israelites, God's people, were clearly polygynous. We see it all over the Old Testament. Never once did God call it sin. These were the men who were closer to God than all the men, any other men in human history. Some of them spoke with God face to face. He called them a friend. They wrote the Bible. I mean, a man after his own heart. And never once did God say a negative word to them about marrying multiple wives. Not once. So where do we get the notion that it's a sin all of a sudden?
What kind of backlash have you the first time you came out publicly about polygamy? Was it were they saying like this is an automatic sin? Was it coming from pastors, friends who you knew?
Oh yeah.
What
I got excommunicated from my Bible study and my church, just for talking about. I don't practice it. I'm just talking about it. And I kind of, tiptoed into it. I tried to, and anyway, like just started to vlog and say, listen, this is what I'm seeing. And it was just, instant vitriol, just so much, nothing brings out the hatred in people like this topic. I've never seen anything so polarizing. Even the sweetest little church lady will just get like, you'll see this grimace on her face. Like it's almost like an evil spirit. So no, it was pretty instant, but that was a couple years ago. And since then, a lot more people have came out. That was my, my goal with it when I started was, okay, I know I'm going to take a lot of heat, but I think there are people that know this truth that aren't speaking up. Some people have to have seen this because it's very easy to find the truth when you read the Bible. And I'm like, if they come at me hard, then some people will defend me because they'll feel inspired. It's almost like, the movie Braveheart, where it's like, he picked a fight. I was kind of like instigating them a little bit because I knew that there are people that were in the background that probably knew this and they just weren't saying anything because they didn't want the smoke. And that is kind of what happened.
I was gonna say you did kind of stoke the flames a little bit.
Oh, Rich has done it way better than me. So I'm super grateful for that guy.
I have said in the past that I believe that while there are mainly like the rules around religion and Christianity, though they come from pastors who are male, I truly, and I've said this and I get a lot of heat for it, I believe that there's a lot of women whispering in their ears. Like there's a lot of these rules that are coming from women.
Yep.
So like with that being said, like was there a specific moment or a passage or in a study maybe that you like something came up that you're like, oh, the Bible is not correct, or what I'm being preached to is not correct? Like what was that moment?
Yeah. This is why I'm so passionate about it too. But just to go back 1 second. So you had asked about, did I take a lot of heat? So my platform before this was sexual purity. I wrote a book called Why Waiting Works. It's got, a couple 100 5-star reviews on Amazon. I had the #1 viral video in the world called 10 Reasons Not to Have Sex Before Marriage. I actually was abstinent and single for about 18 years combined. I had a couple trip ups. There was a 5-year period where I actually backslid hard in a course of 23 years, but 18 of those years I was abstinent and single. So I'm talking like every holiday going to your parent, your family's functions alone. And I'm believing monogamy only, never even questioned it. But what that did was I developed a very large female following because I'm talking about saving sex for marriage. And there's not a lot of guys that want to hear that, right? But women do want to hear it. So I had all women followers. I have 40 some thousand YouTube subscribers, all women. So when I come out saying, hey, polygyny is lawful, it was like God played a trick on me. It was the last thing that they would have ever wanted me to say. So it was instant. Like, I'm like, God, you really got me here because these, now they feel like I just betrayed them. But, so for me, the reason I'm so passionate about this is because of what it cost me. Because if I had known that polygyny was lawful, I would have married my first girlfriend when I was 19. I loved her. I did love her enough. And I certainly didn't want to break her heart. But I could never get my mind around one woman only for the rest of my life. right? And this is what men do because of this false doctrine, is we stall out in the dating market. And we do this catch and release over and over. Because if you tell someone they only get one of anything, they're going to have to try a lot of that thing out. You tell me I get one car, I'm going to test drive a lot of cars because I don't want to pick the wrong car. You tell me I get one pair of jeans, I'm going to try a lot of jeans on, whatever the thing is. So that's why
I hate trying on jeans, bro. Like,
that's why Satan loves this topic, because it's look at Islam. They're outbreeding us like 5 times to 1. They have something like 8 kids per family. And think about that. Like, if the devil's real, and I believe he is, he literally took the greatest force multiplier, which is polygyny, because we could breed faster. We could literally populate the earth and heaven, take dominion over the earth, Christians. If this was accepted, he took it from us and he gave it to what I believe is a false religion. And he gave us homosexuality, right? Which produces nothing. So
that's the funny thing in this, right? Like, when you think about it, like, they keep on complaining that we are facing a replacement rate issue. Like, we don't have, people are not populating, women are not putting out babies, like they used to. And it's like, okay, if you're gonna like legalize any marriage, like for structure, like the one that you think you're gonna like make sure is legal is the one that reproduces population. It's not gonna be the gay marriage, and so you're thinking like monogamous and polygynous marriages will probably like head front of the line. You guys get your marriages, approved of and right away first, like, but it's crazy they don't. It's almost counterproductive by not allowing legal polygynous marriages.
And I've tweeted this many times. I've said that feminism is in the churches. And I think that pastors are cowards at this point because they're pandering to a female audience. And because of that, they expect the donors. They need the donors. Do you agree with that? Or
yeah, I think well, first off, I think there's a lot of pastors that are just parroting what they've been taught. They never really researched it. I think seminary, indoctrinates them to believe, well, it was a sin and, God just never mentioned, he allowed it, or whatever course, shit, excuse my language, but that they feed them. But I do think some pastors, I know people that have talked to pastors and they said, okay, yeah, I know it's not a sin, but I could never preach it because I'd lose half my congregation. So the Bible says you can't serve both God and money. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're putting money in front of God. Now, I want to say one thing, because we talk about, multiplication, and people say that polygyny would be chaos. And I say, listen, the best use case that we have of polygyny is go back to ancient Israel. It went from a single man, Abraham. He was one man. And in just 400 years, that nation grew to 2.4 million people when they left Egypt. They overthrew the strongest country in the world in just 400 years, and they started with one man. Where was the chaos? Everything that Andrew Wilson tried to say, the Lost Boys and all the things. Where was the chaos? Did God not think of that? Because what you're saying when you try to argue this, when it's very clearly regulated in the Bible, it's not even regulated. It's actually commanded in certain situations. Exodus 22:16 says, if a man sleeps with an unbetrothed virgin, he has to marry her. Doesn't say if he's not married. That means, bro, if you sleep with her and you take her virginity, you're taking care of her now. She's yours. So like, it was actually commanded. God told David, I gave you your wives and I would have given you more if you asked. He actually blessed David with his 18 wives. He gave it to him. And he said, why'd you take this other dude's wife? I gave you 18 of them. Right.
Yeah, see, that's what people don't realize. Like when they bring up, like, cause they'll use David or use Solomon as an example. It's like, I'm like, well, David's sin wasn't polygyny. His sin was, murder and adultery. There are pastors out there that do speak about this. And I would say the one that I admire probably the most out there is probably Pastor Joel Webben. And I got his number. We text every once in a while. Mainly, I just harass him and I ask him questions, make sure that my theology is sound. But a couple of months ago, he did this episode called the Matt Walsh versus Andrew Tate, and it was all about polygyny, traditional marriage and polygyny. And so when I watched it, I reached back out to him. I was in the middle of watching it, and then I just kind of sent him what I've come to the conclusion of. And I'll read you the message that he responded to me. So people think they just, this is wrong or whatever. They don't really understand that it's actually biblical. So when I asked him, about polygyny. I said, hey, thank you for doing the episode on polygyny. I said, I've been studying church history on this topic for several months now. And, it seems like it was deemed a sin, not due to scripture, but due to cultural norms. Augustine mentions it in his writings. So I'm watching your episode right now. So thank you for bringing it about this. It seems like there's no biblical scripture that supports that it's a sin. God never calls it a sin. We see God regulate polygyny in Exodus and Deuteronomy, but not condemn it, nor does he outlaw it. And he goes, yes, that's pretty much the answer we give. We acknowledge there could conceivably be context where it's permissible, and right there it's just like, okay, there's framework where it could be legalized and it's not sinful. Now, would you agree with me when I say this? Like, the only reason why it's sinful because it actually goes against the law. And in Romans 13, it says obey the laws of the land, basically. God put the authorities over us. So the legal authority over us is what, God wants us to obey, unless it's like telling us to sin against him. So the only reason why we could consider it a sin today in America is because it's not legally practiced. If polygyny was legally accepted, it would not be considered a sin.
Right. Let me ask a question. So let's say you're living in America and you're a married man and you sleep with a virgin. Now the law tells you that you have to marry her, but the biblical law, but the government in the U.S. So what do you do? No,
you have to marry her or offer her the bride price.
No, you pay the bride price. The father can veto the wedding. He can say no.
You veto it.
But if he doesn't veto, you marry her. You pay the bride price to her father, and then you marry her. Now, who do you obey?
God.
Exactly. Now, here's the deal. This is what I ask people. Polygyny is not illegal. What's illegal is having two state-issued marriage licenses at the same time. And I no one's suggesting that. I don't think that I need Babylon's validation on my marriage. The same government that tells me two men can be married does not need to approve of my marriage in God's sight. I don't need their approval. They lost all credibility when they told me that two men can be married. So I'm not suggesting that you go through Babylon at all, because when did marriage become the government's anyway? It was only like 100 years ago. What business do they have in God's institution?
So Jay, what do you think about that? Like, I tell guys all the time, like, if there's no point in getting married through the state, you're better off, getting an ecclesiastical marriage, like a marriage with your church, and no state license.
I think that people confuse, they don't understand it. They confuse it. Like when I post about polygamy, they automatically think it's, I'm talking about polygyny. They're talking about polygamy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they do this a lot. And I have to be like, no, there's a difference. We're not talking about this, So how do you answer somebody who confuses the two or thinks that they are the same?
Yeah, I mean, we get that a lot. I didn't even know the term polygyny myself a couple years ago. I never heard of it. And now polygamy is the umbrella term, so that can mean a lot of things. Polygyny is specifically when a man has multiple wives. Mm-hmm. Poly meaning multiple, and gyne of females. And now, if a woman has multiple husbands, which is far more rare and also not approved of by the Bible, that's called polyandry. And then poly, everybody knows what poly is, and it's just a little bit of a free-for-all. But all are polygamy. But polygyny, specifically, a man having multiple wives, and that's the only one that's, regulated, blessed, ordained by God. It's the only one. And again, it perfectly mirrors our relationship. Once you see that, it's impossible to unsee it. Like God the Father, we can have no other gods before Him, right? He's the only God that we can have. Yet He can have multiple brides. We're the bride. He's coming back for 10 of us. I mean, his second coming, he likens it to a polygynous marriage in which he's the groom. It's the perfect picture of polygyny.
It also helps with structure. Like it helps structurize women and keep them accountable. So I do like it for that reason.
So that's the very, very reason, though, they label it jealous or dangerous, right? So they say because anything that gives men clear authority and options in the market or the mating market feels like a threat to the system that's built around female comfort, female choice, and state-enforced fairness. So I did a breakdown of this, I want to understand why, because this is interesting. Polygyny is like the number one like standard if you're really about patriarchy, you can't get more patriarchal than a man having multiple women under his, authority and, governing and discipline. Like he's in charge of them. He's responsible for not just one woman, multiple women, and they share him basically, right? Each of them have their own covenant with them, but he has multiple women. That is the most patriarchal standard you could have, because it's not this like compromise. You would think with more women, he's bowing down to them to serve all of them. No, they're actually they have to be on their A game so they could still get his favor, right?
Yep.
And that's what they consider dangerous. They consider it dangerous because of jealousy and abuse. Now, I don't understand where the abuse comes from. What abuse? But
let me just add. So, Red Pill talks a lot about competition anxiety, and I don't like the term, but there is truth, because women will say they only want monogamy. They wouldn't want anything but monogamy. Most women will say that. I'll say, okay, that's great. But now how come, women, for the most part, women are the ones that dream of getting married their whole lives. They, men don't dream of getting married. We dream of getting laid mostly, but women dream of getting married. And when they finally attain the goal that they thought of their whole life, and they get in this beautiful monogamous marriage with a man that they chose, 80% of the time they leave, they file for divorce. You can't tell me that something's not broken with the system. And I'll tell you why that is. Everyone's heard the term, the sex stops after you get married. I know, I've heard that, right? Now it didn't stop.
We just recently did a topic. We just covered this topic recently.
Yeah, it didn't stop with me because I stayed sex. Me and my wife waited until marriage, but it's a common saying. And why is that? Well, think about it. Before they get married, the woman's still trying to secure the man. She's trying to get the commitment. So there is a threat of competition because he might not choose her. But once the marriage happens in a monogamy only, now there's no threat of competition, and all of a sudden she loses interest. Even with polygyny, this is why I tell men, I don't care if you ever practice it. Just put it on the table. Just say it's my biblical right to do it. I may or may not. If God tells me to, I will, and I'm not going to ask your permission, right? That alone will set the relationship in the right order, and that all automatically lets that woman know. It just polarizes the relationship. That's what makes a great relationship, is polarity. A masculine man and a feminine woman are going to do pretty good together. What monogamy only does is creates this egalitarianism where we're kind of equals. And then you lose the polarity, and then the woman checks out, and 80% of the time they file for divorce. So if monogamy only is this great thing, why is the divorce rate 50% with 80% of the divorces filed by the women? It's a broken system. It's unbiblical, and we need to get back to the original design.
When I say polygyny is biblical, they'll immediately come in with, well, the Bible warns you about it. It gives warnings against it. And I said, no. It gives moral guidance and structure on how it needs to be done. That's not a warning.
It's funny because when they hear that, they're like, well, there's like one warning. It says like, don't let your kings take too many wives or too many horses. And that's not about polygyny. That's about idolatry.
Yeah.
That means like, if you're trying to catch all the Pokemon, you're idolizing the Pokemon. But let me ask you this, Gia. Let's say your husband goes, you know what? I want another one of you. Like, how are you going to accept that? Like, what is the process? Like, are you be like, excuse me? Or are you going to be like,
I mean, I've always been very transparent. My husband, we're very open and honest with each other. So I've actually even entertained it. Hey, would you like this? Is this something that you like? I leave it up to him what he wants. And it's really ultimately up to him. That's how our relationship is. So I would definitely entertain it. I have seen nothing against it, but I just think that most men in general don't want the responsibility that comes with it. So this is why they kind of let their wife, oh no, I don't want to deal with more work. That's why I think really feminism is a product of people just getting too comfortable and just, they don't want to do the work that's involved. And I really think that that's why it's been allowed to go as far as it has.
Yeah, like I keep on saying this, and I just recently released a video about Rick, because I know like he was getting just smashed, and I was just sitting there watching it, and I know a lot of these Christian, commentators and podcasters, and I'm watching them just pile on, and I'm going, they don't understand church history. They don't even realize they're just going off of whatever was been preached or taught in seminary as if that was it. I mean, if you just look from the beginning of Genesis all the way to the end of Revelations, you see that there's never been any outlaw or any ban or any like condemnation over polygyny. Yes, you can say it. those in polygynous relationships, they had more problems. Okay, they had more stressors, right? At times. I mean,
Maybe.
David had it pretty rough. I mean, Jacob, his wives were passing him around over mandrakes. Like, I don't want to get pimped over some mandrakes by my wives. I mean, so I mean, you could say that, you know, it does add complication to it. It could, but it doesn't say it's a sin.
Yeah, but here's the thing: and this is going to maybe be shocking for people. The only person that we know that in all of history that was monogamous, the only man was Uriah. Everyone else we assume.
You're right.
And then listen, here's the thing. But Adam and Eve destroyed the world under monogamy, and one of their sons murdered the other. They act like it was a bed of roses. Do you make monogamy only the culprit because of their shit show that was what they did? They destroyed the world. Nobody blames that on monogamy. Why do we blame every problem? Everybody has problems. You know, in this world, you will have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world. We're going to have problems. It doesn't matter if you're celibate, monogamous, polygynous, you're going to have problems. You know, shocker.
In your view, can you give us like the simple version of like what the Bible actually teaches about polygyny versus monogamy?
I mean, biblical marriage is there, you know, no one's against monogamy. It's a monogamy only. The forced monogamy is where the problems come in, because it's people like we mentioned, it's people stall out. Men stall out in the dating market, at least the men with the options. So you could be celibate. That's fine. And here's the thing. Singleness wasn't for women. Singleness is for men. People will say, well, you know, Paul said that it's better to remain single. Well, first off, that was his opinion. He even said it didn't come from the Spirit. And he also thought Jesus was coming back in his lifetime. Okay, but he was talking to men. He wasn't talking to women. He said younger widows should be remarried. By the way, where were all the 40 to 50-year-old single men in the church in the first century that were going to marry these women? There were no single men in the church. They were all married. He was saying those younger widows should join one of those families so that they're not a burden on the church. But basically, every relationship structure, whether you're celibate, monogamous, or polygynous, are all going to have their own set of challenges. They're going to be unique to that. I was celibate for almost 18 years combined, and it was very difficult. Now I'm in a relationship with just one woman, and there's challenges like every other relationship, I guess. I mean, it's pretty good though. And if I do decide to bring in a woman, like you had mentioned with your husband, Gia, it's not going to be like everybody thinks. They think it's just sex. I'm like, no, listen, if I do this, I'm making a lifelong commitment to another human being. And I'm going to go to my wife. I'm going to introduce them. Do they get along? Does this woman have some set of gifts or talents that complements what we got going on? Maybe she can help in various ways. I do not want to bring chaos into my home. So I'm not going to more isn't necessarily better. I'm not saying it's better. Right. So, but if it was better, and I fasted and prayed, and I got confirmation from God, sure, that me and my wife will advise. I'll listen to what she has to say. Ultimately, I'll make the decision. But people confuse biblical marriage with fornication, and I always push back and I say no. One of these was practiced by the majority of the men who wrote the Bible, and one of these things is practiced by the majority of people in church today, because fornication is rampant, even in the pulpit. So you have to get it straight. She's not a side chick or a mistress. This is a human that I'm going to take responsibility of. Unless she is unfaithful to me, I told my wife, I'll never divorce you, and I'll never cheat on you. If I bring in another wife, you're going to know, and it's going to be a very slow, calculated decision, and it's going to be somebody that adds to what we got going on. So that's where people get it confused. And they always, again, reducing it down to just sex is very misogynistic, because you're saying the only benefit of a woman is sex. That's all what you're saying. They're only good for one thing.
They reveal themselves in the fact that they're very superficial in their responses to the situation. So, like I've always said, a woman was created for a man, not the other way around. A man.
I mean, it says that in the Bible. Is this so
right?
blatant?
Like God created a man in His likeness, and the female was there to help him, not the other way around. So a man, that's why I always say a woman needs a man. A man doesn't need a woman.
Yes.
And they don't like that when I say that.
A man needs a mission, and a woman needs a man to help with that mission in submission. Submission. She's underneath his mission. So that's why I say singleness is for men, not women, because a man can be single. It is a lot of responsibility. Marriage is a lot, and even Jesus alluded to that. And whatever chapter it was, he says, basically, it's not for remember
19,
the
chapter 19.
Matthew 19. He's like, yeah, it's not for everyone. He was talking about men. It's a responsibility, and 2 women is a greater responsibility. It's actually a lot more work than what Gia said. The thing is most men hear 2 wives, and when you're uneducated, you think it's every man's dream, and every woman thinks it's
They're thinking menage a trois.
yeah, and the woman's is every woman's nightmare. But then once you educate, the woman realizes, wow, this is a pretty good deal for me. Because right now you got most households, both parents have to go to work. Then you need 2 incomes. So the kids are being shipped off to daycare, and then you send them to school where they're being indoctrinated. You're running around like chickens with your head cut off. And then she's still got to try to come home and, take care of the home and have some energy for sex. And like, I had a guy on my podcast with 6 wives, and he was like, it's so easy. He's like, look, each of my wives makes dinner one night a week, and he's a fantastic meal because they get to think all week about that one meal that they're going to make, all their womanly love in that one meal. They all have hobbies, and they, no problem with the kids because they can run off to the mall or wherever at any time. There's always someone to watch the kid. He's like, it's so easy. Monogamy only is hard, and monogamy only is expensive. And until people realize that you've been fed lies, then, you're going to stay stuck in that line of thinking.
And
Well,
if
we've
you think
seen this
about
debate. Oh, go ahead, Gia.
if you think about female nature, I talk to women all the time, and they're always complaining that they don't have any friends, right?
Yeah.
Because they weren't meant to be in the social status setting that we have today. So if they had other women in their circle that were relatable to them and serve the same purpose, that's where you get the whole "it takes a town to raise children."
Yeah.
That's there, you're creating your own ultimate community.
Like the tribe, the
basically.
village, like the village. You're making your own village.
The village people.
Not those people. You don't want the village people. You don't want
Not
them
the
raising your
village.
kids. It's funny because like I honestly think that our debate, the debate that we had on my channel with you and Andrew, that really kind of started the conversation that we have been hearing about polygyny for the last year. I mean, honestly, if you look at it, nobody really was talking about it that much until that debate, and then Mike Winger came out, and then he came at you, right? Yeah. But then Andrew debated it again, and I got a clip here because this is where it's actually the quite misunderstanding about the New Testament, and they're alleged, they can make it see that it gets outlawed or banned by just a passage. So I'm going to play it and listen to how they frame it, but then the breakdown of it is really interesting.
What do you want for him to answer question?
Moderator, I do want the exact passage
Okay.
that matches my question. He
All right.
said, I'm in sin for having more than one woman. I'm asking him to show me a passage that says if I have more than one woman, I'm in sin. That's what I'm asking him.
All right.
I want the scripture.
Now, this is a really fair question to ask. Show me in the Bible where it says, if I have multiple wives, I would be in sin. And this is probably Captain Terazak, whatever his name is, best position in this entire debate. This is probably the best question he asked at all, ever, the whole damn time, probably ever in his life.
Exact scripture. Hang on. Let me pull it up here. 1 second. Can you pull up real quick 1 Timothy verse 3 and 2?
Yeah, I got it in front of me. I got it.
Can you read it?
A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach.
Okay, and then what about 12?
Verse 12. Let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well.
All right, let me tell you guys that this right here, this is like a horrible reference for claiming that polygyny is a sin. All right, and let me explain this. All right, I will explain why that this is like the worst, reference to try to use. And the reason is because number one, 1 Timothy 3 is an overused and misapplied text, right, against polygyny in the Bible. Specifically, verse 2, where Paul says an overseer, which means bishop, must be the husband of one wife. Opponents to polygyny tend to seize on that phrase right there as an absolute moral law against multiple wives. But this argument collapses under even a basic level of biblical exegesis and historical context. First, it's a leadership qualification, not a universal moral command. 1 Timothy 3, it's not a list of universal laws for all believers. It's a list of qualifications for church leadership. Just as able to teach and not a recent convert applies specifically to the office of elder, so does husband of one wife. It's about setting a higher standard for those in positions of spiritual authority, a standard that goes beyond and above what is required for the average believer. So, Rob, I think you have a different of opinion on me than that, right? Because you have a different understanding of the text of husband of one wife. But I mean, that you could just see the concept of it though, like just them saying like, oh yeah, a bishop has to be a husband of one wife, and he has to have this, and this. Well, not everybody in church is a bishop. Not every Christian is a bishop or an elder. Oh, hold on one second.
Sorry. If you look at the original word, if you look at the original word that Paul used for one, it was mias, right? That was the Greek word, and it means one, a, or first. Okay, you can look this up, Strong's Concordance. And if you said the husband of first wife, now it changes the meaning completely. It means a man that's not divorced, right? So very well could have meant that. But even if it did mean that, right? Like I would concede to Andrew or whoever else, okay, it's for bishops. But that alone implies that having multiple wives was a known possibility in the church, right? He doesn't say for all men. So I'll concede, okay, for bishops, I don't think it means that at all, because what's more consistent with the men that God chose throughout history? Because the men that he chose to lead his people, not just people that he chose, to actually be the kings and the leaders, had multiple wives repeatedly. So you're telling me God had a broken picker, right? And all of a sudden Paul just bangs the left, thousands of years later, and overrides the law of Moses. He didn't even have the authority to do that, number one. But even if it did mean that, which I think a very strong case can be made that it did not mean that. But even if it did, what percentage of the men in the church are not bishops? The majority. And now you're trying to make it a blanket rule for everyone when that's not what it said. Adding to the word of God is a sin. And that's what you're doing. You're adding to the word of God.
Yeah, I mentioned that before. Like, Gia, like, do you think? I mean, I can't just help but see from the preview that like feminism has really got its grips on this, right? But we know that it wasn't like modern day feminism. Like we know that it was like the 6th century, the 4th and 6th century. That's when they actually started outlawing it. But then during the Reformation period, Martin Luther says that it's not a sin. So we see during the Protestant Reformation, they tried to bring it back. But it seems like, overall, especially in modernity nowadays, with feminism as tightly, rooted in the modern day church, there's no way they're going to be able to ever like accept polygyny without like ripping out feminism from the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, and then not just that, but now they have conditioned themselves and indoctrinated themselves with all these type of excuses. Like one of the biggest things I'll hear is, well, everything in the Bible with polygyny ended up negatively or badly, like all the stories that were in the Bible. And then I'll be like, okay, like how do you respond to people who say that everything turned negative in the Bible?
It's not true.
Regarding that.
Yeah, it's not true. They haven't studied. I mean, what happened to Joash? Nothing. What happened to Moses? He had 2 wives. You tell me that Moses, the guy who wrote the one flesh, he wrote Genesis. You tell me he didn't understand what it meant?
So like in Genesis 2, what do they bring up? Genesis 2, I think it's 24. They say the two shall become one flesh. And they try to say that supports monogamy.
Right.
That's like a dick getting in a vagina. That's all it is. That's how you become one flesh. It's penetration.
Right. It's an idiom for sex. I mean, here's the deal. Why didn't God's people believe that it meant that for thousands of years? This is what's wild to me about mainstream Christianity. It's like a game of telephone. Thousands of years later, after we think that we cracked the code, we understand what it means better than the people who received it from the source, because they were clearly polygynous and they didn't think that it meant that. And why when 1 Corinthians 6:16, let's go to the New Testament. Paul says that when a man sleeps with a prostitute, He becomes one flesh with her. Now, let me ask you, can a married man sleep with a prostitute? Yes.
Mhm.
Can he sleep with more than one prostitute? Yes. Well, how can that mean monogamy only? It's impossible, right? So it doesn't mean that. It just doesn't.
They do have a pattern of taking the scripture and interpreting it in a way to say that in the Bible, the pattern is monogamy. And every single time you try to say that's not true, or you bring up another topic, it's just a resorting back to the same kind of circle argument, which is why I don't believe that they think for themselves at this point.
Yeah, God's multiple times in the Bible is compared. He said that he has two wives, Israel and Judah. He said he said they were mine and they bore me sons. So again, no, the pattern is not monogamy. It's what you've been told. So you're trying to make it fit that, and it clearly doesn't. Which is why we come up with all these crazy things. They weren't brides; they were bridesmaids, and every ended in chaos. Well, Adam and Eve, but you don't blame monogamy. You be consistent. Look, was it God's original design for one man, one woman? Possibly. We don't know. That's an assumption. But even if it was, you're not nudist, are you? Do you wear clothes? Do you eat eat meat? I mean, are you a vegan? No, things changed when sin entered the world. So I don't know. I think that the biggest, for me, one of the biggest clues that monogamy only wasn't the original design was our reproductive function. Because
it's interesting when you look at it,
a woman can make one baby a year, and a man can make millions of babies a year if he had enough women. And God set that system up. Okay, why does a woman stop making babies, at 40, 45 years old, but a man can basically reproduce until he's dead? There's a reason for that, because none of that would make sense under monogamy only. But God set that system up, and biology leaves clues.
It's interesting because, if you look at it, Jesus's bloodline, his whole bloodline, his lineage, they're all, Jesus' entire genealogy is stained with polygyny.
It is.
Jesus came from the line of David and Solomon. Both had multiple wives. David was called a man after God's own heart, while he had multiple wives. It's kind of funny. Even in prophecy, right? Even in the prophecies, like Isaiah, in that day, 7 women will grab one man and say, "Let us be called by your name."
Take away our reproach.
God didn't rebuke them. He didn't correct them. He let it stand. Why?
Right.
Because being called by a man's name was honor, not a sin.
Yeah. It's a reproach for a woman to be single and childless.
Yeah.
Which is what we have now.
Now, you believe, polygyny could, I guess the debate prompt was wrong, or, it was rough. But it was like you said, you believe that polygyny could save the West. But there's much more than just allowing people to have multiple wives needs to take place before the West could be saved. Would you agree to that? There would need to be addressing the family court laws, because if you don't address the family court laws and you just let people get married, multiple wives, well, you're gonna have multiple wives divorcing you and you having to pay alimony to both of them over no fault divorce. So you would think that it's just part of the solution?
Only if you get married through the state will that happen to you, right? I don't suggest doing that.
But I mean, there's going to be guys that do. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at for the average, the general, 85% of Americans are going to get married through the state, right? Most people are not going to do covenantal only. So for the majority, you think that they would have to fix family law first?
Yeah, you're not wrong in saying that for sure. It's a big part of the solution, but probably not the only thing that would need to change. Yeah.
So I mean, how realistic, Gia, do you think this is? Polygyny ever being accepted in America?
I don't think that many people would be able to do it. I don't think they'd be able to do it properly. So on that aspect, there would be a divide there, and it would be very hard to adopt.
But here's the thing, 80% of the women are sleeping with 20% of the men. Some say it's 90-10. So right now, polygyny is already happening all around us, because at the end of the day, you can change the laws, but you can't change instincts.
The heart.
God gave us certain instincts. And you know what? Women want the best. They want the best man they can get. And to be honest, men like variety. They want the most. Okay. Now, which is why they're just doing it in a very degenerate way, because you got all these Facebook groups. Are we dating the same man? Baltimore. Are we dating the same man? Los Angeles. They're all trying to catch the guys, because
Or
the guys. Right. So like you can't change. You can change the laws, but you're not going to change human instinct. Okay. And men are wired for variety. But here's the question: why are men wired for variety? Because God wants all of his daughters to be covered. He doesn't want women running around not able to find husbands. Nothing's worse for society than that, because they have needs too. They want to reproduce, they get horny, they get lonely, and then they make babies with no father. And then you got all these kids raised in fatherless homes, and then society collapses eventually because you got a bunch of degenerates. 80% of the people in jail are from what, 25% of the fatherless homes. Very clear correlation. So like, if there wasn't men didn't have the desire for variety, how would the imbalance get solved? Because, and people say, Andrew, Wilson said, well, there's 50-50, 50% men and 50% women. If polygyny was supposed to be, there would be more women being born. No, that's not true. First off, it's about 90 to 95 for every 100 women, 90 to 95 men. But that's not really, when you just think about this, men die younger. We're incarcerated at a higher rate. We're drug addicts at a higher rate. We are homeless.
Are you saying polygyny can stop like drug addicts?
No, what I'm saying though, I'm saying that men, all these things, men are go to jail at a higher rate. We're homosexual at a higher rate. There's a lot. So when you throw, and then here's the big one: many men are just either unwilling or incapable of marriage. They're unwilling because they don't want to take responsibility. They'd rather fornicate than
that's why
actually.
That's why I don't think it's going to be a hard thing to like. It's
let the
still
market,
going to be.
but let the market decide. Let the market decide. Because if a woman decides, if she looks at a man and he's a good husband and a father, that's the beauty of polygyny, because a woman can actually make a much safer choice. She can see what kind of husband is. I had a woman swipe on me on a dating app recently. So I'm married, and me and my wife are considering. So I have a line in the water, and she's like 30 some years old. And she said, something. She asked how old I was. I told her, and she's, oh, I'm looking for someone closer to my age. And I'm thinking, how many guys out there, like if a guy's 35 years old and he's single, he's probably not looking at a 33-year-old. He's probably messing with,
unless he already has kids and he doesn't want any more. Like
he's a high value man is probably looking at a 25-year-old, or he's divorced, so he's already got a failed track record. Polygyny allows the woman to make a safer choice because the guy's got a resume. Is he a good husband and a good father? And okay, well, pretty safe choice. When you get married in monogamy only to the first time marriage, it's a little bit of a roll of the dice because you don't know what kind of guy he's going to be. You don't know if he's going to be a good husband.
It's also why women tend to want what other women have, because
100%.
it signals to them that the man knows what the fuck he's doing.
Absolutely.
But like when we look at, for instance, that public post, and I'm just going to quote it again, right? Rich Tidwell said, I'm polygamous. He said, I have two wives where we've got baby number 8 on the way, right? So that was like the gist of his post. That created a shitstorm, okay? A shitstorm. And it's funny because when you really get down to like the root, because all of the noise, do away with the noise and really get down to the root of why people are upset. They're upset because pretty much all of this world is doing what they want behind closed doors. They're living and they're doing all this sins behind closed doors silently while acting righteous in public. And what does that do? That causes, because there's this old saying, when you suppress desire, it comes out in judgment. So what we have is a lot of people living in sin and quiet and then turning right back around to feel better about what they're doing by judging other people. And what Tidwell did was, I'm not hiding. I'm not doing this. I'm telling you straight up what's up. And I'm not living in sin. And that is the root of the noise. That is what pisses people off the worst. And you can see this all over, right? You can see Trump doing it. You can see Andrew Tate doing it. They're saying, fuck this. I'm going to live this way right out in public, and you guys need to deal with it. And that is what burns.
They're unapologetic with it. Yeah, they're completely unapologetic with it, and they're like, we don't care what the feminine say. We don't care what women want. Because, really think about it. Monogamy only really puts guys in a position. The only thing that kept the monogamy only going well back in the day was the social buffers of women not in the workforce, men being the provider. That those buffers, right, kept men in this hierarchical position to where that they had authority over their home and stuff like that, because they were the source of resources. But as soon as you remove that and you make it equal, right, now you have no hierarchy. It's all egalitarian. And then the only way to even kind of course correct that would be to have polygyny, where more than one woman want the same guy, and they all have it, right? Like what Rick is doing is he's kind of establishing, like, look, in this world of chaos where all you guys are saying you can't find a woman, or you can't find marriageable women, or you can't find women that'll be submissive. What am I doing here with two women that are submissive to me? And they have no, they're not jealous. They're not fighting over this. We have this two different covenants. And that right there destroys the status quo.
Because biology also supports polygamy. Like when you see every man that gets married, why does his testosterone drop? Like that wouldn't happen if he was regularly having sex, if he was having that desire, that direction, that purpose. So like it also supports through biology.
Yeah. Well, I almost liken the man's desire for variety to like a woman's desire for childbearing, because, and men's too, but mostly women. So, as a woman, that having a baby is going to be a lot of work. It's going to be sacrifice. It's going to be sleepless nights. It's going to be emotional, whatever, if they get in trouble, and you still want it. Now, man, if the Bible, sex meant marriage. So you get into a marriage with a woman, and after a while, the sex just isn't as exciting as it once was. That's true for everybody. It's called habituation. But a man sees a new woman and he's like, ooh, and there's actually something called the Coolidge effect, which actually it picks up the sexual appetite of everyone involved, including the first wife. She actually gets more turned on when another woman enters the picture. But if men were one,
it's like a nice version for like passive dread.
Right. Yeah, maybe. But the thing is like even and men still, even though it's going to be a lot of work for that man to now cover another human being, another woman, he still wants it because it's new. And God put that in him because he wanted men to solve the imbalance. There's maybe 20 to 30% of men are really good, would be good husbands. And now you got 100% of women who need husbands. How are you going to solve the imbalance unless a man has the desire for variety? Because if he was just, okay, I'm good with one. If every man was just good with one and they were one and done, you would never solve the imbalance. But because men like variety, and it's not a flaw, it's a feature. It's the only thing that's wrong is how you express it. If you go out and start banging chicks and busting nuts and girls left and right all over town, like a lot of the guys are doing under forced monogamy, yes, that's a sin. No one's suggesting that. But if you marry that woman, like Rich has done, and you take responsibility to protect and provide for her, that's not a sin. God's very happy with that. Women were designed to be helpmates. Here's the other thing. If you have a big mission, a big vision from God, and you can get that done with more than one helpmate, maybe you need somebody. Maybe my first wife's really good with finance, and the other one's really good with kids or administration or whatever. And I go, you know what? If I had another set of gifts here, I could probably do that mission that God gave me better, and I'd have a higher chance of success. God's happy with that. If you could, it's like telling a man he can have one employee, a business owner. You only get one employee, but you got to build Amazon. It ain't going to happen. Like helpmates, that's what they're there for. And women, at the end of the day, women push back on this, but women say they won't settle. This polygyny is the only marriage structure that actually lets them prove it, because you can choose the best man.
But we have to also get, we probably don't have time today, but we have to also get into the economy and like how America has created economic development and how that affects men being able to even do this, right? Because really there's a whole nother subset of discussions along this line. Like how can a man, he would have to be, right, substantially financially set to do this.
That just points out, like, I don't think polygyny is called for every man. I think it's always been for men of means. Like you had to have the ability to facilitate this to begin with, to be a good steward.
I think men need to be good managers, not necessarily be rich. Because if you read Proverbs 31, that woman was a hustler. She woke up early. She was tending to her house. She actually had side hustles. She was selling, purple fabric to the merchant. She was doing all kinds of. So you're trying to tell me it wouldn't be to my benefit as a man to have 3 of those women in my house? Bull crap. That woman she was a net positive. Okay, so this idea that women just sit around and they don't do anything and the man's got to work. No, listen, that's not biblical. Okay, I'm not saying my wife, I don't want her to call another man boss. That's my belief. But she can help me with my mission. And if I have 3 of them, man, I'm going to be way more. I could change the world with 3 Proverbs 31 women.
Yeah, I mean, like right now, like if you're gonna go off of like this like male financial like headship there, only 18% of couples could actually be in a polygynous relationship because only 18% of couples could live off of one income.
And I think those 18% men are doing it on the down low anyways, for at least, like I know a lot of the successful men, they have a wife, but they're doing what they want on the side anyway. So
you and I both have friends that we know that that's normal for them. I mean, look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk has 4 different women that he's financially, I mean, he's essentially married to them. I don't care what anybody says. Like they all live in this compound. He has 4 different wife or baby mamas in there with all his kids in this like huge compound. And nobody, when Sarah, or what was her name, Ashley St. Clair came out, there was no backlash that Elon got. I mean, sure, he got a little bit of shit thrown at him, but nowhere near as bad as Rich is getting right now from the conservative group. I mean, Rich comes out, and this is a point that I really want to hit home on, that Elon Musk comes out, finds out that he has 4 different baby mamas, not married to any of them. All, he financially supports all of them. He has all these kids with them. Everybody's fine with it.
Yep.
But Rich comes out with saying, I got 2 wives, baby 8 on the way. And it's like, crucify him.
Right.
So really, one more question here. And this is the last one. I want it tight, Rob. I want you to nail this one for me. Let's say every angry Christian that's going to be in this comment section had to sit still and listen to you before they call you a heretic for 1 minute. What is that sentence going to be?
1 minute? Well, it's too much pressure. I want to say one thing about the Elon situation, and Gia can confirm this, is I think that women crave security far more than exclusivity. Right? You want to know that man is there for you and he's not going to drop you on the side of the road. Again, going back to what I told my wife, I'll never divorce you and I'll never cheat on you. That's a lot of security. That's way more security than monogamy only can promise a woman, because what often happens is a guy marries young and her sexual market value is decreasing with age, like it or not, and his sexual market value should be rising if he's actually making something of himself. So now he hits 45, got 3 kids, and he decides to run off with a 25-year-old and abandon his family. That is not okay. That doesn't provide any security for the first wife. It's a shitty thing to do, which is why Paul said, that if you unlawfully divorce your wife to marry another, you force her to commit adultery, and that's wrong. So, but that's what monogamy only does, because it doesn't show men a righteous path. Like, I believe that righteous men will choose the righteous path if you show it to them. But if you don't show them a righteous path, that desire for variety sometimes will come out sideways. 50% of men right now in the church are looking at porn regularly. That's a very prominent study.
76%.
Yeah, even the pastors. Even the pastors are looking at it. So, like, how are you telling me that's monogamy? We don't even know anybody monogamous. Monogamy means one sexual partner for life. I guarantee you, we don't even know anybody that's monogamous. What we do is called serial monogamy. We hop from person to person, leaving a trail of broken homes in our wake. This is exactly what Paul said you can't do. And that's because of
soft polygyny.
It's soft polygyny. Exactly. So it's like, I don't know if that was the answer, but that was, one of many of my arguments is like monogamy only is like a 2-seater. You're driving down the road with your wife and you see this pretty girl hitchhiking on the side of the road and you pull over to pick her up and your wife's like, what are you doing? There's nowhere for her to sit. You're like, sorry, you got to get out. But polygyny is like, an Econovan. Hop in, babe. We got room for all of y'all. Like, as long as he's going to take care of that woman. And again, the woman gets a friend. Women like to talk. They like to, I don't want to talk, babe. I want to work. Don't make me your girlfriend. I don't want to be that. And that's polygyny allows that, because I personally, as a man, I love being around that female energy where they're laughing and I can just be the guy looking out for them. like taking care of things that a man does, and they can do what they do. Like, it's a great situation. Of course, I wish I was shown this when I was younger, but my whole goal in this is I want to just find the 27-year-old me. That was the year I accepted Jesus, and I bought into this monogamy only lie, and it cost me a lot because I'd have kids that are probably, starting college now. I wouldn't recommend they go to college, but my point is I probably
got
have
kids in college, so
I'd have kids in their early 20s by now. If I would have known this, I would have married. And instead, what I did was I slept with hundreds of women. I polluted the dating pool. I slept with other men's future wives.
You are the problem.
I was the problem. Yes.
Damn you. So was I.
I think it's important, that men have options, and I'm not knocking monogamy either. Like there are people that choose monogamy, and that's fine. But I think it comes down, and I tell this to women all the time. If monogamy is something that both of you want, then you have to be prepared as a woman to wear multiple hats. You have to be out there. You have to be like a man loves novelty. So if you're not going to mix it up, and do many things and be valuable in his life, then maybe monogamy isn't your thing, because he's always going to be left feeling like he's deprived of something if you're not willing to step up. And I think that women, like the three things, whenever I think of what women really need in a relationship, they need competence, right? They need competence. They need a man who's going to fix their issues, or he's a fixer. So that's important. They need investment, and I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about like his time. They need his time, his investment. And then they need protection. And the protection is not just when he's there in front of you. They need that when you're gone too, right? They need to know that, he's going to say, is there anything you need? Like, he could be out working all the time, but if he just sends a simple text, hey, are you doing okay? That's important. So I think women need to understand that they have needs, but now give a man his options because he has needs. And that's where I think we're going wrong in today's marriage. It's all about women, and where are the men getting their needs met?
And we kind of see that like with the whole Ali Bastucky like thing, like, men, we need your masculinity. Men, we need this. Not once did she acknowledge, like, ladies, we owe men this or that, it's pretty sad. But all right, whether you love what you just heard or you hate it, here's the bottom line. If you're going to run your mouth about this topic, you better be willing to open your Bible and deal with it honestly. Not just regurgitate what your favorite pastor or your favorite conference speakers told you. Listen, you don't have to agree with what Rob said, all right? But you have to stop lying about what scripture actually says.
And if this episode rattled you, good. Just sit with it, because you need to go study, go pray, go wrestle with the text. But make sure you take all that frustration out in the comments, like it, share it, and tag the people who swear this conversation shouldn't even be allowed. And if you're one of those people who wants to just keep digging into biblical masculinity, feminine design, and all the stuff that the church is scared to touch on, stay locked in with us.
So, Rob, thank you for stepping into the fire with us. And to everyone watching and listening, we're not here to make you comfortable. No, we're here to make you think. We'll catch you on the next one. So until then.